Excellent. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Florian. I'm a solution architect for Red Hat in Ireland. So what that means, basically, I design IT solutions for enterprises that we work with here in Ireland. That could be banks, insurance companies, could also be, kind of someone, your next door neighbor, who has a small company and does something in the IT space. But mostly we kind of work in the enterprise space. So shortly about me, as you can hear, I'm from Germany originally, so please forgive me for my accent. I hope everyone can understand me. I'm a couple of years now in Ireland, I think 5 or 6 years, living in County Donegal up in the northwest. So I can see that, one or two people already are also from Donegal that were in the chat, so that's good to see. It's not going to take too long, right? So I'm just going to give you guys a brief overview of what Red Hat does, who we are, for the people that maybe don't know the company. And then I talk a little bit about the kind of jobs that we have available for remote workers in Ireland and, something that you might be interested in. So I can't see questions while I'm presenting, but if you put them in the chat, we can answer them after the presentation. So very briefly, Red Hat is a global company. So we have about 105 offices all over the world in more than 40 countries. And I think currently we stand at about 18,800 employees or so. That obviously fluctuates from day to day, but it gives you a rough estimate that we're not the smallest company in the world, but we're also not, one of those Siemens companies with 500,000 employees. So we're decent sized company with a very interesting business model. And I'll talk about that in a second. But what's very interesting is the company is only 30 years old and was the first open source company to actually reach 3 billion euro in revenue. And I'll talk a little bit about what open source means and why that's kind of a differentiating factor for what Red Hat does. But I think what's always good to see is Red Hat is not a stagnating company. So you can clearly see we're growing and we're growing quickly, which is obviously excellent, right? Which means there's a lot of jobs, there's a lot of progression available internally. And it's generally, I suppose, healthier to be in a growing company rather than in a declining or stagnating company. So I already spoke about that a little bit. We do enterprise IT, so obviously that's kind of marketing fluff, but we're represented usually in most Fortune 500 companies, in kind of the largest enterprises in the world. There's very few companies that don't use Red Hat technology, right? Which obviously gives us very good insight in working with these companies and kind of what's happening in the market, and also generally if the world or the global economy and the IT kind of rollout and infrastructure grows, kind of regrow with it as a company, which is obviously quite good for us. But let me talk a little bit about what we actually do, because that's very different. So everything Red Hat does is we develop enterprise software, but we do it in the open, right? So we do it with an open source development model. So what that means is anyone in the world can actually use our software for free, right? If you want to, you don't have to pay for anything. You can contribute back to our software. You can use it in whatever way you like, and you absolutely do not have to pay for it. And that's very different from how other companies will work, right? So think about Microsoft, or think about, I don't know, Adobe Photoshop or something. You could not just go and use it for free, right? But we do that, right? So you can use our software for free, and we actually encourage you to do that, because that means you can contribute back and you can tell us what we could do better and how that could work. So there's kind of a million projects in this open source space that are out there, right? So I can start a project today, make it available online. I might not have a business model for it, but Red Hat might have an interest in that and say, hey, that sounds very interesting. And then what Red Hat does on top of it, right? So first of all, Red Hat has tended to contribute back to the code base, help to make the project better, and then actually build a product out of it, right? So open source development means usually it's a project, right? It's like something that someone works on, but it doesn't really have a business model, and it's not really a product that someone can leverage and actually sell to someone or support in an enterprise world. So effectively that's what Red Hat does, right? So what we do is we take code that is open source available, where we contribute back into the community, and then we make a product out of it by building user interfaces, doing testing with it, making sure that if you use it in a business, there's no security vulnerabilities. You might have heard about the HSE issue, for example, right, last year. So this is something where actually open source is a great model, because thousands of people and hundreds of thousands of people can look at the software and actually make sure that these vulnerabilities and these bugs don't exist. Right. So out of these million projects that exist, Red Hat picks out about 24, and we productize them. And then we give them a name, and we sell them. And the way we sell them is we don't sell licenses or any of that. What we do is support, right? So that's kind of our business model. We're kind of like an insurance company for software, effectively, because we can give you the guarantee that your software is going to be supported 5, 7, 10 years down the line. And when you have an issue, you can rely on someone to call them and help you, which is quite important in an enterprise. So that gives you hopefully a very broad idea what we do. So in short, we're an enterprise software company. And I'm going to talk about this here a little bit, because that's quite important. So there's a book written actually about the Red Hat culture, because it's very different from kind of other cultures in the world, because mostly you have your boss who tells you what to do, right? And then you do what your boss tells you to do, and this is how it is. So within Red Hat, it's actually the opposite, right? You can maybe imagine that, because in the way we develop software, we kind of also work internally. So we kind of a bottom-up organization where it's quite important what the people that are actually working, people like me, have to say, right? And that is fed back basically then to management, senior management, and decision makers on the top. And in that way, we have this model of a meritocracy, which basically means the best opinion matters. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, how old you are, how young you are, what your title is. But if you have an opinion, or if you have something to say and you can articulate it well and explain well why you want something to happen, let that be for HR people or software developers or solution architects or salespeople, then that's actually important and that matters, right? So to me, that's a very good culture and a very interesting culture, because it's very inclusive, right? It means it doesn't matter where I come from, what my gender is, or which country I live in. Like what I have to say matters more, right? And that's I found quite important internally, especially you can tell, right? I'm in my late 20s, early 30s. Sometimes you come in and you feel like, okay, my boss or my boss's boss, he tells me what to do, and you feel obliged to, kind of go ahead with that. And here I can actually question, right, people, which is something that I really enjoy, and question also decisions when I don't agree with them. So there's a couple of values, and I think when you think about applying for Red Hat, I would definitely advise to kind of just look for the Red Hat values, and they kind of reflect that, right? So you generally have the freedom to do your job in the way you want to do your job. Mostly it doesn't really matter when you work. For some roles it kind of does, but if you prefer to work in the evenings or early in the mornings, or be flexible, and you have kids and need to take off a few hours during the day, mostly you can do that, right? There's very few jobs where you can't do that within Red Hat, but mostly you can do that. What is important though is that you kind of get your work done, right? So it's kind of the accountability and the commitment that you're going to get your job done. But it's also the courage to question decisions and processes internally. So to give you an example, we have a mailing list, 18,000 employees on that email mailing list, right? And everyone can write basically to everyone. So you can send an email and say, why are we doing so bad? And, why do we not hire more women? And then suddenly 18,000 people see that, and they can contribute back to that internally. And that's quite frightening when you can send out an email to 20,000 or 18,000 people, but it's very interesting the kind of responses that you get and the kind of conversations with that. But that gives you a very good idea, kind of, within Red Hat, how much you're encouraged to actually speak up and contribute back to the company. So just to give you a brief overview of Ireland specifically. So Ireland, the first office opened in Cork in 1999, and then the Dublin office in 2012. And then with the Feet Henry acquisition in Waterfall, there was another office acquired in 2014. So these are the offices that we have, and then we have remote workers literally in every county in Ireland, right? Including Northern Ireland. So you can see me, I'm up in Donegal. People in my team live in Mayo, County Cork, County Kerry, Dublin, really kind of we are represented everywhere, which is great, right? Which means you can fire up an email to the mailing list in Ireland and be like, hey, is there anyone else in Donegal who wants to meet up? So that way I met up with people, for example, in Letterkenny already, just by sending out an email and ask if anyone else actually works in Donegal. So that's quite nice. And we have about 400 people in Ireland working for us at the minute. There's 3 main areas. So there's an HR and finance department in Cork that has remote roles, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. Waterfall was an acquisition from a company called Feed Henry, which was a spin-off from Waterfall IT, and is currently our app dev, so application development center of excellence. We have a bunch of support engineers that kind of support from Ireland, because as I told you, kind of support is mostly what we do within Red Hat and kind of our business model. We have a bunch of technical writers as well, and there's a lot of growth in that as well. So technical writers are really kind of in demand at the minute within Red Hat. And then the Dublin office is mainly technology sales people, so that would be me, for example, but they can also be remote, right? As you can see on with me, and engineering people as well. So while I say they are generally kind of how they are split up, most of these or a lot of these people work from home, work remote. There could be HR people working in Waterford and Dublin. This is just kind of like the general structure, but really what has happened in the last couple of years is that, it's all over the place. Everyone is encouraged to work from home. Everyone can work from home usually, and it doesn't really matter where you are anymore. So, and I put that in red here, nearly all roles can also be done remote. So just to give you an example for the Waterford side, so the Waterford side is quite interesting because it was a spin-off from a college, right? So there's a bunch of different nationalities, I think 16 or 17 at the minute. There is, I think, 40% of women on the side, which is quite rare in the IT space, right? If you come from the IT space, you usually have quite a low number. So that is very interesting. And there's a bunch of products that are being supported from the Waterford side, and they are excellent people, and a lot of them now work from remote, which is brilliant, right? So that means they can work from anywhere. People like me that prefer to live in Donegal, nice, and get a big house on the beach, they can absolutely go ahead and do that, and that's one of the great things about it. So now, just looking at time, how do I find a role within Red Hat that might be interesting for me? So I put a link to the job portal in here, but if you just Google for Red Hat jobs, it's going to be the first link that you click on. So there's generally 3 locations available. So there will be a drop-down location, and you see that here on the right, for Cork, remote Ireland, and Waterford. Just because it says Cork, it doesn't mean it's not a remote role. Sometimes it's just the way it's being classified, but generally all of the roles that are currently up can absolutely be done from remote. And the only other thing that I think is worth noting, and I have a note in here, so most roles that are offered as remote but not listed under Ireland, they are actually also available to applicants from Ireland. So I put an example on the bottom left here, right? So we're looking for principal software engineer, and it says remote working. And that role is, as you can see, for Great Britain remote. So because as long as you're kind of in the same time zone or in Europe, and if a role is available within Europe, there's usually no issue with hiring someone in Ireland. So if you see a specific role, and it might be in Germany or it might be in Spain, and it's classified as remote, and there's no reason why you would have to be in that country, there's absolutely no problem applying for that role. So we see that a lot with people. I've done that myself. My role that was written out was originally written out for a different country, but I ended up working in Ireland. So I would really encourage you to actually maybe look for what you're interested in first, and then see if it's available in Ireland, or see where it is available, and then maybe have a look afterwards what is available in Ireland. I think that's kind of a good strategy. So to give you an idea how many or what kind of roles are currently available within Red Hat, so there's a bunch of roles available within the HR and finance department. So I have 2 slides for that, just to give you an idea, from a strategic procurement manager or senior tax analyst to a senior HR manager or a senior manager for payroll. Really kind of anything in between is available. So it's about 15 roles, I think, currently in HR and finance, and I think 90% of them can be done remote. And even if they're not written out as remote, apply talk to the hiring manager, because mostly there's really not an issue why someone couldn't do a role remote. It's very rarely that we would kind of say, okay, you have to be there in an office to do that. So if you're technical or kind of from that realm, I put technical writers into that realm as well. There's also another 15 roles available, really kind of from internship to senior developer. There's really anything in between available. So I think internships are always very interesting for people that are in college and don't feel comfortable or live somewhere remotely and there's not a whole lot of jobs available. So I would really encourage you to apply. So it's one role, but there's multiple positions that are available. And then from engineering and technical writers, you can have a look here. There's a bunch of roles currently available. So especially the technical writer ones are very interesting because if you have, for example, a degree, I don't know, in history or in writing or English literature, there's a lot of guys kind of in the technical writing department that have these kind of degrees, and that's obviously excellent, right? If you can do it remotely, live in a nice quiet space and do a little bit of work during the day, and then shut down your laptop. But other than that, again, I would really encourage you to just go ahead maybe and have a look at the website. I think we currently have about 800 or 900 roles available globally, and probably like 400 or 500 roles in Europe. So out of these 400 or 500, I'm sure if you're somewhat interested either in technology, HR and finance, technical writing or writing, or maybe you're even a solicitor, I'm pretty sure I've seen a role as well for legal counsel, then absolutely feel free to apply. So last but not least, right? Within Red Hat, don't be afraid not to apply for a role because you don't think you're a great fit, right? So when I applied for a role, I thought I'm not a great fit. I met about 20% of the hiring criteria. But what's much more important kind of an experience is your attitude, right? If you come in and you are excited, about what you're applying and, you're knowledgeable about, and you can say, look, I really want to do that because of reasons A, B, and C, then, absolutely, someone is going to give you a chance. It's the same as, if you have a degree or maybe, didn't finish your degree, but you're absolutely excited about that space and it was just the academic part that didn't work for you, also don't be afraid, right? But this is kind of great within Red Hat as well. There's loads of people, that said, computer science wasn't really for me, but I'm great at writing code. And the same with age, right? Maybe if you're 50 and you did a degree, maybe at one of the ITs, kind of like an access course or another course, and you feel like, oh, I might be too old for the workforce, or I might be too young because I'm only 21, right? And don't be afraid, right? If you're old, not too old, or not old enough, that's not really a reason, right? I've never seen someone not getting a job because age was a problem. And I think that's it for my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to have a look at questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Florian. Loads of amazing stuff in there. And yeah, that was the kind of quick version because there's so many different roles and so many different positions. And we have a few questions actually. And I'd like to start maybe with Ken. Question specifically about maybe two types of roles. Maybe you can share what you know, Florian, about some tech-based roles, and then maybe project management roles as well. So are those available maybe in Ireland at the minute?
Yeah, so project manager roles, we had a bunch of them available late last year, and they're coming up continuously as well. So we have a big services department or professional services in Ireland, and we've been hiring about 15 project managers actually recently. And I know that there's more roles available. So even if there's not a role right now, roles generally come available every week, every 2 weeks. And if you make it a habit of just checking on a Monday, on a Friday and just check for roles, and also check for the Great Britain one. So I know that in the UK, I think there are currently 1 or 2 project manager roles available that could be done from Ireland as well. So I would say absolutely have a look at that. And then the second one was for technical roles, was it?
Yeah, technology based. Maybe or anyone can qualify which interest which roles they're interested in. Just let us know. Yeah.
So specifically, software engineering are probably obviously the biggest space that we have for technology in terms of roles. So I talked a little bit about things like a crypto software engineer. I don't even know what that's supposed to be. I suppose it's someone who has a little bit of an understanding of crypto technology and is also a software engineer, but also things like Go language software engineering or Python software engineers. If you're a cloud consultant, for example, obviously cloud is a big topic. Everyone talks about the cloud and how is this going to help the world. But we have a lot of roles available for cloud consultants, for example, for our professional services team. Internship, obviously, the software engineering internship is quite an obvious one. If you maybe have a background in telecommunications, we obviously Ericsson sits in Athlone, so we have quite a few people in Ireland that kind of sit in that telecommunication space. So we're looking for a software engineer there who understands 5G technology, who understands WAN technology, who understands all these good things that are needed in the telecommunication space. But also if you're data analyst, for example, I know everyone is looking for data analysts. So we've hired, I think, 3 or 4 people in December for data analyst positions. And currently, I think there's 1 or 2 available as a senior planning and data analyst. And there's another one available as an information systems analyst. So if you're kind of looking for that space, to grow your career and, get a foot in the door, I think these roles are really great for that as well. And then the role that interests me the most is if you're a senior software engineer for any space, right? Doesn't matter what your background is, you can write code. I've done that for 2 or 3 years, the advanced cluster security one. So get in touch with me if you're interested in that one, because that's a really great product. And generally what's really great within Red Hat is your team is not going to be Irish based. Your team is going to be all over the world, right? You're going to work with people from Spain, from Boston, from Milan, like from Malaysia, and I find that very interesting because you get to hear a lot of different opinions from people that you might have not usually engaged with. You might be working in Dublin, or you might be working in Letterkenny, and there's 20 other people from Letterkenny, them from Letterkenny IT from college. It's great, but actually having a chance to work with all of these different nationalities and people from all over the world, I find that always very exciting.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Florian. And what's the best way for people to reach you if they have any questions about that?
Yeah, so best way, probably the easiest is on LinkedIn. If you just put in my name, Florian Moss, I think there's only one. But other than that, I put my email in the chat. I get a lot of emails per day. So if I don't respond within 24 hours, I apologize in advance. It can take 48 hours sometimes. But just reach out to me by email as well if you feel more comfortable that way.
Appreciate that, Florian. So we have a question from Deborah. This is maybe the last question about specific roles. What about product manager roles? Does Red Hat have those at the minute? Any going at the minute?
Yeah, I think I covered that very briefly. So I don't think there is a specific product manager role currently available in the Irish team. But if you look for in the drop-down menu for the roles in the UK, there is 2 roles currently available, and just check weekly. So I know actually from talking to the team that there are more product manager roles becoming available in the next coming weeks. So sometimes it just takes a time. Early January, you guys know, in an enterprise, budgets are approved for new roles. They come available. We can't just make 200 roles available at the same time because it's very different to hire for roles at the same time for the hiring managers. But have a look, especially up until late February, because there's a bunch of roles coming available kind of on a daily basis, really, because I see that a lot. I check in daily, and there's 2 or 3 new roles. So if there's something that you can't find right now, don't be disencouraged. Just check in, 2 or 3 weeks later, or get in touch with me and ask, hey, that's my background, that's what I'm interested in. Do you know if something like that might become available? And I can direct you maybe to someone of the managers who might be hiring for that or might be looking for that type of role.
Brilliant. And another question here, are there any training courses that you draw from? So anything that you're sort of looking for, any courses that are out there that are useful for the Red Hat people?
Yeah, so that's very interesting. So obviously I would say that applies more to technical people. So I can maybe put together an email because there's quite a bit of content available. So just kind of looking at time, but you want to get a bit technical because I think the question is probably more directed for these kind of people. But so our bread and butter product is called Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it's the product that still make about half of our revenue with. But it's kind of not the most exciting technology, I want to say, because it's an operating system, right? It's fancy, it's good, it offers a lot of functionality. But in the technology space, everyone currently talks about something called Kubernetes. Kubernetes is kind of what all of the jobs are all about, all the big money currently is in, and everyone is interested in. So we also have a product in that space, obviously, naturally. So learning about that, I think, is probably the most exciting way or the best way to get ready for job market. So there's a site called developer.redhat.com, which offers a lot of really good free content for that. I'll put that in the chat as well while I'm speaking. Where there's a lot of content available, especially for developers, but it's also good for if you're sysadmin or have a general technology background, just to offer you some kind of free content to learn about that kind of technology. Other than that, I find Udemy is a great resource if you want to learn about Red Hat technology as well. It costs about 10 euro or 11 euro to subscribe for a course. The training that we offer is more geared towards enterprises, to be quite honest with you. So the training that we offer costs usually 1,000, 2,000 euro because it's really meant, for an enterprise scale. It's probably not as accessible for you as an individual. But if you go to the developer.redhat.com site, or if you go to Udemy and look for OpenShift or Red Hat technology or Ansible, or get in touch with me, and tell me what you're interested in and what you want to do, and we can figure out, because we do everything from storage to development to operating system to cloud native development. There's really anything in between that we do. So it's such a broad space that it's the best probably to just have a quick chat with me and we can have a look at what might be interesting.
Brilliant. We've got a few questions here about tools and culture and sort of working together, especially in a remote open source culture. But just one more about some roles. Do you know, Florian, of any junior non-tech roles like customer support, sales support, or admin that are going at the minute? Because a lot of our people would be non-technical as well, and they would have this experience looking to come in, enter the workforce at that junior level.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that, then obviously the HR finance department is probably your best bet. So currently there is, I think, about 3 roles available. So I would say the financial analyst role, the business finance analyst, and the workplace coordinator for facilities is probably your best bet, with very little background, if you're interested in that. And some of these roles, as I stated, say on the job description to have 1 or 2 years experience in that. But again, don't be disencouraged by that, right? So if you say, I went to college, I have a business degree, or maybe I have my background is in kind of that, and I might not have a specific background as a financial analyst or business analyst. But I'm excited about it. I read up on it, looked at the job description, and that's something that I think I could grow into. That's absolutely possible, right? To get into that, even as kind of like someone out of college or with maybe no work experience yet. Internship level, at that level is, I don't think we have anything in that space from an internship level available, but as a kind of junior career or first kind of step into your career, I think these roles are absolutely fine to apply for non-technical people.
Brilliant. That's brilliant to know. Yeah, thank you so much. Question from Graham about how teams at Red Hat communicate and how do you ensure effective connection when you're working in such a large distributed team?
Yeah, this is very interesting, right? So this is a very good question, actually. So within Red Hat, the answer is actually it depends. So we don't have one enterprise communication tool. So effectively, our teams are split down usually in smaller teams, and you end up with a maximum of 10 to 12 people kind of in a team. And you decide as a team how you want to work, right? So to give you an example, in my team, we use WhatsApp for informal communication. We use Google Chat for formal communication with each other. We use Miro, which is kind of like a whiteboarding tool to communicate planning and strategy sessions. We use Trello for to-do lists. So, but these are tools that we can pick ourselves, right? So that is quite interesting. In other organizations, you're being told you have to use Microsoft Outlook and that's going to be it. Well, you're not being forced into anything. So you can basically pick whatever you like and what works best for you and your team. And that also means sometimes saying, that doesn't work for me, right? So it obviously means if I'm saying, look, I'm not a big WhatsApp fan, companies owned by Facebook or whatever, and I don't feel like ethically kind of inclined to use that, I could say, I feel like we should use something else. then that works as well. But yeah, the communication is a very interesting and very challenging part. That changes on a constant basis, and it might also depend from project to project. You might have a project which requires more synchronous communication, or a project that requires more asynchronous communication, because you might be working with a team in different time zones, right? So email is maybe better than chatting to someone on Slack or chatting to someone on WhatsApp. So that kind of changes on a project by project basis as well.
And that's a good point, actually, from Paul, who asked, are there any challenges when you have meetings with both remote and on-site people? So obviously the async communication, the messaging is one thing, but what's the Red Hat approach to meetings?
Yeah, so generally meetings are a pain for everyone, I think, at the minute. So because currently within Red Hat, the general guidance is that no one should work from an office. In fact, you need to have a reason to go to an office. A very good reason is that I don't have a place to work from at home, which is a very good reason. But I would say currently about 95% of all people probably work from home, right? So for the ones that work in the office, everyone has a laptop. You get a choice what kind of laptop you want to use mostly, and it's not really as much of an issue. So even though you go to an office, you're basically working as a remote worker, except that your location is somewhere else, right? You're sitting at someone else's desk, and you still have the exact same kind of flexibility in terms of meetings. So just to give you an example, for my one-on-one with my manager, he used to live on the same street as me, or same road in Dublin, and we tended to go for a walk, maybe on a Wednesday evening with his dog, and had our one-on-one during that session because that worked for us, right? Like that was fine. So there's a lot of flexibility in that, but I think a lot of the people are going to have an option to not go back to the office moving forward. So if there's no absolute reason where you want to have to go to an office and you prefer to work from home, I think that's going to be the direction forward for Red Hat employees on a general scope.
And at Red Hat, is there any mention or use of co-working spaces, digital hubs locally? And a question has come in, would that be something that you would get a stipend for, that may be covered in your in how you work?
Yeah, so this is something we're currently looking at. You're talking to the right person. So I'm talking directly to the Western Development Commission, and I know that there's initiative for the co-working spaces. So currently that doesn't exist in that form. So Red Hat employees, they get a budget to purchase office equipment for home. So if you need an office chair or desk, you get a budget for that to do that for your own home. But for co-working spaces, let's say, for example, in Donegal or in Letterkenny specifically, there's nothing like that currently available. But you can talk to your manager, for example, and your manager is going to find out what can be done on an individual level. On a broad level, for the entire enterprise in Ireland, nothing is done yet. But for example, me personally, right, I use the co-working space in Letterkenny IT over the summer because it was available and they made it available. So that was no problem for me. And that was great. I found that to be a great experience. But hopefully in the next 3 months or 3 to 4 months, we have some different news on that, because it would be great if we had something on a more strategic level for Red Hat Ireland available there.
Brilliant. And on that note, Graham wonders if you will join the Grow Remote Donegal group for a meetup, for a coffee or something soon, Florian. If we hook you up, would you be interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be very interested. I also saw someone mention the IT at Cork event in the chat. I spoke at that one last year as well. So,
brilliant.
But maybe some people have seen me on that. That's very good.
You're definitely the man to speak to. You're the man to speak to. Maybe one more question. Wondered. Very good question here. Based on your experience of open source and this kind of philosophy, would you say there are any downsides to it?
It is such an interesting question, right? So this is going to be a very nerdy question, but so it's a big question. But I try to explain to my parents, actually, how do you make money if all of your stuff is available for everyone to use, right? That's a very legitimate question. I think it's a very interesting question. So Red Hat was the first company in that space that was able to find a business model. And actually finding a business model is not that easy, right? Because the reality is, if you talk to a large enterprise, they probably have big teams that can, provide support themselves. So what's really important within Red Hat is that our people are excellent at what they do, right? The only way we can support organizations and we can provide value to other organizations is by being absolute champions and absolute experts for what we do in that space, right? That is not to say that you need to be an expert when you come in, but you're absolutely expected to be passionate, especially in the technology space, be passionate about what we do and have an interest in that, because ultimately the only way for in the open source space to be successful is to be continuously on the forefront of innovation, and to be an expert in that, and then go ahead and help other organizations adopt that and help other organizations to implement this kind of technology. And that's where you provide value. You don't provide value by writing a nice piece of software, putting it out there and say, off you go, right? Because that's not how enterprise IT technology works, unfortunately. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But I think the question is absolutely legitimate, but you can probably write a book about that. But the short answer is, luckily, Red Hat has found a business model that works, and probably because of our history being the first ones in that space, right? We have a certain credibility in that space. But if you're new in that space, I think it's challenging these days, right? It's challenging, but it's not impossible. There's loads of other open source companies that are having great success, and they do exactly what I just described. They are just absolute experts, great in what they do, and always on the front of innovation and keep innovating.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Florian. Well, Geraldine says you're a great advocate for Red Hat, Florian. Laura says, thanks, Florian, so much in that. So useful. Thanks for that answer, Florian. Great session, Florian. So yeah, just want to say thank you very much from everyone who's attending here in our morning session. Don't think there are any more questions coming through. Your email, Florian, is fmoss@redhat.com, or people can get you on LinkedIn. Vivian says, thanks, Florian. Anything else you want to finish with, Florian, before we head off?
No, I just want to thank you all. I think it's great that so many people are interested in what I have to say about Red Hat, which is great. But more particular, I think it's great that something like this initiative exists, and other projects like this in Ireland, because obviously someone like me who lives remote in Donegal is obviously very much appreciated that people like us now have the opportunity to maybe get into jobs that we wouldn't have access before or previously. And we can build a career from a spot in Ireland where we really want to be, rather than just being forced to live in Dublin or live in Cork. No offense if you live in Dublin or Cork and that's your decision, but it's great that at least we have a choice these days.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Florian, and thanks again for joining us, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks
see you
so
at the
much,
next
guys.
Jobs Club.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.